Tip-tap goes the rain, spitting on my window pane. Drip-drip from the trees, sodden, earthy and soggy leaves. Splosh, splash, puddle pools, jumping on their way to schools. Onomatopoeia, the formation or use of words that imitate the sounds associated with the object or actions they refer to. The property of a word of sounding like what it represents. Water has many. The interdependent relationship between water and sound is so fundamental to our connection and understanding of water. The rain patters and drums, the waves roar, the brook murmurs and whispers, the puddles of mud squelch, that it is intrinsically woven into the very linguistic code of our language. Many have explored the powerful connection between sound and water. We have Masaru Emoto and his study exploring the impact of sound on the molecular structure of water. We have those that like to play around with cymatics. There is Peter Davey, a saxophone player who invented a device that boils water with sonic waves. The innovative use of sound coupled with water seems to have no end. So much so that in recent times, biologists are discovering that ultrasonic water can even treat the most resistant of infections and heal wounds at rapid pace. And in a future where electromagnetism was harnessed with the utmost innovation, water, sound and frequency had to have a major role to play. And of course it did. They wanted us to know that it did. And not just the water here on Earth. They were telling us to look up and above. They wanted us to know that what they had achieved right here on Earth was only possible because they had studied what existed above. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God said, firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. Some criticize the King James translation of the Bible for its use of the word firmament. But in the original Hebrew, the word is rakia, which translates directly as firmament. In the New International Version, it is called the vault. In the English Standard Version, it is an expanse. In the Good News Translation, it is dome. What is important, however, is that in all translations, and in the original Hebrew, the notion of the firmament or vault separating the waters above from the waters below does not change and remains consistent. There is water above our realm. The telescope is an interesting instrument, both at once an apparatus for discovery and simultaneously a weapon of deceit. There are two primary types of telescope, the refractor and the reflector. A refractor uses an objective lens, usually a convex lens, and a reflector utilizes a single or a combination of curved mirrors to reflect light and form an image. Many reflector telescopes use either a concave mirror or a parabolic mirror. This is what a reflection looks like in these mirrors. The eyes we were born with, and which we see the world through, are convex lenses. We do not witness the world through curved mirror reflections. This is Jupiter as seen through a reflected Newtonian telescope. And despite the slight spherical distortion caused by the reflected mirrors, this is still not what NASA has shown us. Your mind immediately sees a planet because you have been programmed since birth to associate an image like this with the notion of a planet. Just in the same way you associate the moon with a ball of rock by default. But as you can see here, both refracting and reflecting telescopes produce images similar to the Nikon P900. The Nikon lenses have been criticized by some astronomers as lacking the power to really see the luminaries above. But as you can see here, there is not much difference between the Nikon and both types of telescope. And in each we see that Jupiter is radiating some kind of light of its own. Both amateur and professional astronomers present footage such as this. But look what happens next. The astronomers here are using imaging processing software to turn their raw images and footage, which display a circular object in the sky above us radiating its own light, into a NASA-style planet. And this type of doctored, processed image is not what we see with our own eyes through these lenses. I am not saying that this is deliberate deception. Astronomy is a practice of its own, but it is very important to never confuse the highly edited images and footage we receive with reality. And it is also worth being mindful of those that are being very manipulative. They are usually the astronomers with the paid sponsorship from magazines and websites. It is also important to note that what we call planets are not actually planets. They are wandering stars, and all of the wandering stars are of a similar nature to the moon. Unlike the rest of the stars above our firmament, their course and journey above us is not fixed and consistent. Their paths deviate from the concentric paths that the rest of the stars consistently make around Polaris. And the reason for this is because they are not located within the waters beyond the firmament. They are very different, and their function is way more occult, and their significance to life here on Earth much more important than we realize. We will be returning to the true nature of the so-called planets and moon later. Back to the waters. Arcturus is one of the brightest stars in the sky. Here is Science magazine's artistic impression of the star. And now here is Arcturus as seen through a refracting telescope. There is no resemblance. What we see through this telescope footage is really similar to what we see when you zoom in on the stars above with a powerful Nikon camera. Many criticize the refracting telescope because it can produce chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration is a failure of the lens to focus all color to the same point. The result can be purple fringing, and we see that here. Photographs can suffer from chromatic aberration. Interestingly, the Nikon does not produce the same chromatic aberration when zooming in on Arcturus. Therefore, you could say that the Nikon is actually more reliable and stable. Through both the telescopic lens and the Nikon, Arcturus is pulsing, shifting, rippling. It is dancing geometry. Many will jump up from their seats and exclaim, "It's because of atmospheric distortion and light pollution. It's because Arcturus is so far away." But if it is atmospheric distortion, then why do all the stars display their own unique geometry and light patterns? They should all distort in a unified, consistent manner. It is not atmospheric distortion. The stars are pockets of sonoluminescence in the water above. They are self-illuminating, radiating their own light and frequencies in the waters above. Our own convex-lensed eyes tell us that there is some kind of water above. We see it in the stars and when rockets accidentally hit the firmament. And, like I said before, just because the so-called planets or wandering stars and the moon appear spherical does not mean they are. They are not synonymous with the stars in the water beyond. They are something else entirely. Our advanced predecessors wanted us to watch the stars. They wanted us to understand that electromagnetic vibration and frequency produce pockets of sonoluminescence in the waters above. They were pointing it out because they wanted us to know that water was the key to unlocking the real potential of electromagnetic energy. They wanted us to know that once harnessed, the ethereal electromagnetic energy could be fused with water, so it could be stored and distributed. And once produced, the water could be manipulated, enhanced, and elevated to a level of new possibilities through the use of vibration, frequency, and sound itself. Their civilization depended on the industry of what we will call the living waters. Their technological advancement enabled them to transform the entire Earth into a power grid. But this grid was only possible because of water. The civilization of the future was an electromagnetic water world. Canals are no great secret. They are found everywhere across our realm, both the great and the small. Most of the great canals around our Earth are connected to the ocean. Salt water is an excellent conductor of electricity. Sodium chloride is ionized. We have the Corinth Canal, connected to the Aegean Sea. We have the Panama Canal that connects both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The Suez Canal connects with the Mediterranean Sea. And there is the Volga-Don Canal, connecting the Azov Sea, Caspian Sea and Black Sea with the major oceanic networks. All of the canals built before the 1920s were not built by us or those in the history books. We inherited them. And while the official narrative tells us that the Volga-Don was finished during the 1950s, its construction actually began back in the 16th century. All narrative surrounding the construction of these canals is purely fabricated, and I will show you how much later in our journey. Once you start paying attention, it becomes very evident that most continents and countries feature a combination of canals and rivers that span the entirety of the land itself. The citizens of the old world utilize the oceans and rivers to create a grid of interconnected waterways to provide water to all of their areas of habitation. In order to pass difficult sections and keep the supply going, they would build aqueducts and viaducts. Sometimes these were constructed with the purpose of energizing the water as it passed through and into different areas, and that is why many were designed with symmetrical archivolt structures. The Romans did not build these structures. The entire infrastructure of so many cities found across our realm are designed around canal systems. Look at Amsterdam from above. The precise geometric grid lines here are not roads, they are canals, and the sole purpose was to supply water from one area to another. The water was stored and manipulated for a variety of purposes in reservoirs, water towers, pumping stations, cisterns, and other structures. The water also functioned to provide necessary balance. A complex grid of electromagnetic production, distribution, and consumption would generate a lot of heat and magnetism. Water provided not only a balance of diamagnetism, but also ensured the entire grid did not overheat. When looking at all the magnificent generators and other instruments of power from the old world, we can always find water nearby, or the remains of water storage. Sometimes this is hidden primarily underground. Many do not realize that many so-called Victorian cisterns and reservoirs run very far under a lot of our cities, and other times it is a central characteristic feature of these structures. An example of which is what the controllers have redesignated as castle moats. The electromagnetic water grid was not just an energized version of what we are already familiar with in our cities and towns. It was much, much, much more. It was way more magnificent, impressive, and futuristic than we could even imagine. The grid was connected to central, bigger power stations, or what is more appropriately termed star stations. Sometimes these were isolated stations, and other times they comprised entire cities. We are going to have to fly to a higher altitude for this. I need to show you. Hold on tight now and keep your eyes open. Look. The sole existence, let alone construction, of these star structures is almost beyond our comprehension. As you saw, they are found everywhere across our realm, with undeviating geometric consistency. A wondrous impossibility. Perhaps they had some kind of technology that allowed them to view huge areas of land from above while planning and building. They were never thoughts. That is a fairy tale invented by our controllers. The stunning geometric precision and symmetry of the star structures would most likely have functioned to enhance the power of the generators and to etherize the water, or turn the water into living, energized water. We can see from comparing some of these ruined sites, and some left a little more intact, that water would have been present throughout the structure. Before the controllers destroyed and drained most of these structures, they were full of water. They were connected to rivers and canals and the oceans. They were a key component of the entire power grid. The star structures are fractals of symmetrical geometry, just like many of the ceilings of these huge energy generators. And, like the acoustic cavity magnetrons and resonators, the symmetrical sharp diagonal walls would have caused the ions to perpetually vibrate. Old plans and illustrations, which have no doubt been edited or manipulated in some way or another, offer suggestion as to how complex, integrated, and essential the star geometry was to the entire grid. Look at Paris here.